Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we have another shop talk video. Today's topic is gonna be what kind of brake lube to use where, and we have two examples of it here today. Now before we go ahead and begin, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below. Definitely smash the like button because it helps the channel out. With that said, let's go ahead and get started on today's video. So today we're going to be talking about brake lubricants and what to use on what portion of the brake system. Now before we begin, I know that a lot of people can do these a lot of different ways. I'm going to pretty much recommend and talk about the ways that I do it and what I like to grease up. If you disagree with it, hopefully you don't turn the comment section into a big, oh, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. Again, I've been doing brakes for years in my shop. I haven't had any issues doing it this way, and to be honest with you, I rarely ever, if ever, get a brake job as a comeback. Usually once I get them done and I do them right, I don't have any issues. They don't come back. There have been a few here or there for like a noise, maybe like a cheap bracket or something, but it wasn't really due to a part of, let's say, something like the greasing process, just as a FYI. So before we do this, if you disagree with, let's say, me lubricating a certain portion, which I'm sure there'll be one or two out there, state the way you do it in the comments. I would love to hear it and, talk about it. But at the end of the day, let's just not name call people, but let's get into this. So I have two lubricants here, and this is what I primarily use. There's two different types, and I use it for two different types of places. Now, before I get into talking about the lubricants, let's talk about the points that I like to lubricate. So when I'm doing a brake job, there's a few things that I like to lubricate when I'm replacing pads and rotors. On top of doing a really thorough cleaning of your brackets and your caliper and any sort of surface that's gonna basically be in contact with the brake pads or the caliper or anything like that, you want to get that out of the way first and foremost. That's something I don't have to say. Starting off as clean as you can, as rust free as you can, is always the best policy, because your brakes have to fit nice and freely and be able to move in order to get you good brakes, which a lot of people may be speculative and be like, what do you mean, Mike? Like, how do your brakes have to be loose for them to work correctly? But it's true. Your brakes have to move in order for them to work. So either way, where I like to lubricate basically, and I'm going to start off with the caliper itself. On the caliper, there's going to be 2 points. There's going to be the piston side, where your caliper piston is, and then the outer side, which holds your outer brake pad, which I'm going to call the finger side, because typically it looks like 2 fingers on each one with a hole in the center. So basically, I like lubricating the caliper piston face and those 2 little fingers on the outer edge. Basically, wherever the brake pad is going to be making contact with the caliper, I put some lube on the caliper portion itself for that. Now, you can also, lubricate the back of the brake pad on the shim if you want to do that. But I find that if you lubricate the back of the shim, you maybe just be putting more grease, and it doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing if, let's say, you use a colored lubricant and it's just, smeared all over. So if you put it on the caliper face, it's a lot better and a lot cleaner, a lot neater looking. But that's where I always like to lubricate one point. Now, the second point that I like to lubricate is my slide pins. Now, no matter, if I serviced it previously and I know what grease is on there, you always want to take out your slide pins, clean up any grease, and just basically make them bare metal. And you want to do the same thing for where the slide pins go into in the bracket. Typically what I do is I just put a little brush attachment on a drill, and I use brake cleaner. I go in there and I just basically clean them out, make sure that they're nice and free and clean, because if you have a lot of grease contamination where you're using one grease instead of the other and you cross-contaminate, it may give you issues. So you just want to play it safe and get that done and make sure it's going to be perfect. So that's another point I like to lubricate, is the slide pins. Now, on top of the slide pins, I also like to lubricate where the brake pad will sit on the bracket on our caliper bracket assembly. You do have your shims. Now, some people may disagree with this, and I've seen a million different ways done, and people saying no you should, no you shouldn't. But I like to put a little bit of lubrication on my slides and the contact points where the brake pad will basically sit on the bracket. Now, inevitably, that grease is gonna wash out and basically dissipate. But I feel that if you put that on there, it does help, and it'll last a couple months. And if, let's say, your customers are good about getting brake services done, which Again, no one really ever does, but a lot of people don't know this. You should be servicing your brakes at least once a year, and in a brake service, typically you remove the brake pads, you clean up all your surfaces, make sure your slide pins, everything's moving correctly, you grease them up. You re-grease, any contact points, and you could replace those little caliper clips or shims along with that way and just help free things up so your brake pads last and your brakes work correctly. I know no one really does it, but that is basically how you should be doing it. So where I'm going to begin is we're going to start off with our Silglide. Now, I will say this, both of these lubricants, I know a lot of people might use interchangeably. They're not going to be using both sometimes. You might have just bought one and use it for everything. And I will say that there is nothing wrong with that. Both of these products are going to have the same type of use, but I feel one is better than the other for a specific task. Now, the reason why I use Silglide and where I use Silglide mainly, I like using this on the caliper pins, basically the closed off area. And the main reason why is because this is a silicone based lubricant. It's really good for rubber items, like the caliper slides will normally have a little bushing on the end to help dampen vibrations. This will be good to that and won't let it swell up. And also the rubber boots that the slide pins go into, this will not affect them. Now, you can use this on the caliper face as well. It's a synthetic high temperature brake grease. I believe these are silicone bases. They'll work on primarily anything, so you can substitute this for the other grease as well. However, I find the other grease that I'm going to show you is a little bit more tougher in a way for other aspects of it. That's why I like, using the two together. So primarily Silglide, I like this on my basically slide pins. That's it. I don't really use this on any other portion, although you can. Now, on everything else that's not my slide pin, I use this. It's called Creme Lube. Now, this is very similar to the Permatex Purple. Very, very similar to that. It might almost be, almost the same thing. But again, I don't know. This is a high temperature brake grease. This is what I like to use externally. Now, this is colored purple. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up. It's a nice purple color, and I use a brush to apply it. But this is what I apply to my caliper piston, my caliper fingers, or the outer end that holds the outer brake pad. You can apply this to the back end of the brake pad if you wish to do it that way. Although if you just take this and smear it on the back of the brake pad and then put the caliper on top, it's not all going to go away. Caliper only reaches certain parts. That's why I like putting it on the caliper, so that way you don't have this blob of purple what's called grease all over, and customers don't really find that aesthetically pleasing. So I avoid smearing it on the back of the brake pad, although if you want to, you could, up to you. But I like putting this directly on the caliper piston and on the little finger assemblies. Another place where I use this is that after I'm done cleaning up my bracket very thoroughly, I will take a very light coating of this and put it on my caliper bracket itself before I install a shim or anything. And the reason why I do that is to help prevent any rust buildup, or at least to try to keep it down. Once again, caliper brackets are going to endure a harsh environment. They're out in the water, the cold, the snow, the ice, so this will eventually wash away. But if you use a light film coating of it before you put on your shim on the actual bracket, it'll help be a little bit of a rust proofer for you and keep rust from building up, at least until it eventually washes out. Now, after I do that, I will put my caliper bracket clips on, which is the little shims that you get. You call them a shim, you call them a clip. I mean, I've heard both terms. I'm referring to the little inserts that go on your bracket before your brake pads go on. And then what I like to do is, once again, take a little film coating and just put it on my caliper bracket clip wherever it's going to have any contact points. Now, if you don't want to put it on your caliper bracket clip, you can also take your brake pad and kind of get it in the little areas on the tabs where it will slide into the caliper bracket and the clip itself. Either way is fine. However, I just find that if you just cover the clip bracket itself in a light film, you don't want to go crazy with this stuff, because there is such thing as too much. You can't contaminate the brake pad. If you, let's say, get too much of it, it heats up and gets all over the rotor, you will basically hurt your brake pads and contaminate them, and thus not making them very effective. So I like using light coatings of this. And this stuff is really, really good. It's actually really sticky. This is very similar to the Permatex Purple. I just picked this up because this is what my supplier has, and I get, you know, better price on it versus the Permatex. But ultimately, I think they're both the same. I believe I have a bottle of the Permatex and this, and I kind of put them both through their paces, just, you know, looking at what chemicals are in them, and they're both basically almost very similar. So this is what I use on anything external of the slide pins. And that is just my method of how I do it and what I like to do. Now there's a million variations to this, and again, you could probably use both of these in either one spot. However, I will say that most calipers, they do come with something like this on the slide pins from the manufacturer. That's the main reason why I use the Silglide. However, if you cleaned up very well and got all the old, you know, sort of brake lube or grease out of it, you can definitely use this in the slide pins as well. As a matter of fact, I have used this in the past on the slide pins. The only reason why I really don't like this stuff on there is that this stuff will get a little cakey instead of just staying more of like an oil base. You can kind of feel it getting just tiny bit chalky, and I don't like that because that can cause a drag. So I stopped using it in that sense of that aspect and have gone back to using my Silglide. I've always used Silglide since day one. This is how I was taught to do brakes, especially on the brake pins. But for a while there, I, you know, basically implemented this, and like I said, I didn't have issues with it, but your brake grease on your slide pins should remain a grease and very oily in a sense, to keep it flowing nicely and moving. If it gets a little chalky and cakey, probably not the best grease to use on there. And that's what I found with the Permatex and this Creme Lube stuff. So that's why I use a multitude of both of these products on different parts of my brake jobs. And as far as anyone out there that might say, hey Mike, what do you use on the rotor surface on the hub when you do a pad and rotor job? Well, I clean up my hub surface, and I do not use anti-seize. I've had so many issues with cars that go to other shops. They put anti-seize on the hub. It eventually warps out your rotor, and again, this is gonna be highly debatable. But I don't use anti-seize. If anything, I put a light film of some sort of penetrating oil like WD-40 or something of that nature, something that'll just leave a film and kind of dissipate. I know that you can use a lot of rust preventative items as well to put on there, but realistically what I do is a little WD-40 and I wipe it off, just give it a little bit of moisture in there, because WD-40 will basically run off and dry off and not compress. Because if you use a grease on your rotor and you try to squeeze it together, that fluid is gonna basically, or that grease is gonna act as a pressure item and basically push back. It's not gonna allow everything to go flat, which can cause warpage or some sort of vibration. And that is why I like leaving the hub clean. Definitely don't use any of these products on that hub surface where the rotor will meet the hub. So with that said, that pretty much covers today's video. I just wanna go over the two different items and how I use them, because in my head, there's no one-all, stop-all solution. Now, this, you can probably use it for everything. Again, it actually, on the back, if you read one of these, says you can use it on all aspects of the brake job. However, when it comes down to the high heat situations, like on the actual, caliper bracket and the piston areas, I find that this can liquefy a little bit more than this stuff. This stuff stays a little bit chalky, which is good because it's a little thicker. And that is the main reason why I use the two different types. Two different greases for two different aspects that serve two different purposes. And that is what it's about. So hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Like always, comment, like, and subscribe because it definitely helps the channel grow. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next video.